Start. So Phylum Porifera comprises the sponges. Sponges are the simple invertebrate animals that live in aquatic habitats. Although majority of sponges are marine, some species lives in freshwater lakes and streams. They are found in shallow ocean environment to the depths as great as 5 kilometers. But there are some certain species of sponge that can withstand high pressure that can live about 8 kilometers na kalawmon sa dagat. So, all adult sponge are sessile, meaning they live permanently attached to a rock or other submerged object, be it coral or shipwreck, basta where they found it suitable for living, or kung dito man sila natugpa sa larval stage nila, dito na dyan na sila mudako. And they do not move about on their own. So Phylum Porifera means pore-bearing. Sponges take their name from the small holes that covers their body. So it is it the holes that it is the holes that in the sponge constitute to its name, pore-bearing. So sponges are considered to be one of the simplest animals, primarily because their bodies are not organized in organ system or even tissues. So they don't have organ system and their cells don't form tissues. Rather, sponges are made up of grouping of cells that work together to contribute to meeting the daily needs of the sponge. So sponges come from variety of shapes and sizes. For example, they may be shaped like tubes, fans, cones, or just simply blobs. So in the upper left of your screen, you can see the example of a blob sponge. Next to it, the uh, the right the rightmost upper rightmost portion of the screen shows a example of a fan shaped sponge, and below it is a cone shaped sponge, and then next to it is a uh, cylindrical sponge or tubes. So some sponges, why are sponges considered to be animals? It is simply because they don't have chlorophyll, that they can process their own food. Uh, and they are heterotrophs. They capture different organisms for nutrition. Most of the sponges that reproduce sexually produces sperm. That is why they are considered to be sperm and eggs. That is why they are considered to be animals, not plants. So, the epithelial cells from a skin-like layer on the outer surface of a sponge. So, there are epithelial cells kaning naadiri sa gilid. I don't know if you can see the console. So, it has some it has some particular cells that binds them. So these cells protect and enclose the sponge. So kaning mga epithelial cell, kani kaning kaning brown portion, and then itong mga yellow portion nga na ay flagella, skillet. All sponges are filled with pores that gives the phylum its name, as we have said earlier. These tiny holes are actually hollow inside of a porocyte cells, a special type of epithelial cell. So, itong mga holes pala are made out of cell. Kato sila is kanang murag donut nga kuan sa cell pero ay murag tubo yun ba. And then these porocytes are narrow and connect the outside of the sponge to the inside cavity. From so kaning brown dapit na mga shape nga kuan. Mao ni sila ang mao ni sila ang naa sa kaning unsa naa sa gawas. Kaning naa sa kaning yellow na pod kining na mga flagella mao ni sila ang nasa sulod. So inana. These pores are sometimes also referred to as ostia. They provide opening for the water, which carries planktonic food and oxygen to enter the sponge body. So the inner surface of a sponge is lined with cells called collar cells. So ang inner surface daw sa sponge is lined with cells called collar cells. So kini sila inner surface. Kining pink gani kita ninyo. So the collar is made of tubes surrounding a long whip-like thread called flagellum. So yun, kita ninyo. Collar cells. Whip-like. So kaning murag ikog-ikog, this is the flagellum or flagella kung plural. The collar cells move back and forth. They create a current of water that moves into the ostia and out from the osculum. So here, as you can see in the picture, na ay daghag ostia diri sa sponge, dira moagi ang tubig and then will go out from the osculum, kaning bangag sa sponge diri sa ibabaw. Several gallons of water can circulate through a fish-sized sponge in a single day, bringing in tiny food particles such as suspended bacteria, bits of plants and animal matters, and tiny drifting planktonic organisms. As the water circulates the fine tubes of the collar cells filter out the food particles and takes them into a cell digestion. For this reason, sponges are described as filter feeders. So, as nakabalo naman ta sa characteristics of filter feeders, no? So, back here, kaning flagellum, move na siya back and forth that will create murag force that will allow water to enter here in the ostium, I mean ostia. So in that case, musulod diri ang tubig. Here kita ni direction of musulod diri ang tubig and then katong tubig nga ay kanina pong unsa nga moabot dira kaning gagmay gani kayo nga unsa. Yung gagmay kay nga murag balahibo they will filter out sila tong mo kuan sa mga planktonic organism nga musul ila ang mo engulf. So, yun. The particles of food are drawn into the collar to become trapped in the engulfed by the cell body and digested in the food vacuoles. So, ayun. So, as you can see here, pareho lang sila picture, no? But, natingala mo, si kanirang collar cells ang naka-benefit, dili. Okay. Ang collar cells, i-transfer niya, maghatag siya og part sa tungkuan, katong mga na-engulf niya, maghatag siya sa katong ipasa niya diri sa kang aning pink si amobicite. Ipasa niya and then kanina po si amobicite, mao na po na siya ang mag-spread sa nutrients throughout sa iyahang kuan, sa iyahang area. For example, kaning amobicite nga naa diri kani siya ang maghatag og nutrients aning yung brown nga naa sa kilid. So, amobicite serve as a kaning circulatory system which kanang gahatag siya og siya ang ga-supply og oxygen, way nga naga-supply og oxygen og sa food pod. So even though nga wala sila organ system, each cells perform like an organ. The composition of sponges. The skeletal elements of sponge are produced by the amoebocyte. So not only for digestion and then circulation, kani si amoebocyte kay nagaproduce og spongin, the soft fiber that forms natural butt sponge. These sponges feel so soft and springy to touch because they have soft skeletons made up of flexible fibrous spongin. So bantog di ay nga ang singalan ni bantog nga humok ang sponge. It is because sa sponge site. Other sponge have stiff skeleton that feels pricky because it is made of hard silver-like spicules, which are also built in the. So, a mobicide creates or kanang produces kanang the kanang skeletal elements of the elements of a sponge. So, they produce spongin like ano and then siliceous sponges have spicules that made up. So calcareous sponges have spicules made out of calcium. Spicules also have many shapes and sizes. So while some sponges have no spicule that they look and feel like lacy skeleton of glass. So here we go in the classification porifera. Una kay ang calcare, homoscleromorpha, desmosponge, and then hexatinilidia. Sponges are divided into these classes based primarily on their composition of their spicules and skeletal fibers. So, subclasses. So, sa class Calcare, nasa subclass Calcinae, subclass Calsorone. And sa class Homoscleromorpha, nasa superclass Silicaceae. Sa class Hexatinellida, nasa subclass Amphidoscorphora, then subclass Hexaterophora. Sa Desmospongiae, subclass Keratosa, subclass Mexospongiae, subclass Haploscleromorpha, then subclass Heteroscleromorpha. So, if I will discuss all of the subclasses, then the time will not be enough. So, it's recommend na basahon ninyo itong libro nga yatag ni ma'am. So ang one way to classify the sponges is about the spicules. So what is spicule? So spicules are structural elements that found in most sponges. They provide structural support and deter predators. Large spicules that are visible to the naked eye are referred to as megascleres, and while smaller microscopic ones are termed as microscleres. So class Calcaria are made out of are animals in the phylum Porifera, the cellular sponges. They are characterized by spicules made up of calcium. So calcaria. Calcium carbonate in the form of the calcite or arog. While the spicules in most species have 3 points, some species have either 2 or 4 points. That is class Calcera. So sa Homoscleromorphous class of Porifera was originally considered part of Desmospongiae. However, due to advances using genetic data to reconstruct phylogeny, sponge phylogeny, this newly recognized clade was discovered. Homoscleromorpha is now recognized as the fourth class of the sponge. So it have an extremely poor fossil record due to their tiny spicules. So characteristics niyang specules kay gagmay kaayo. They have leucone body plan and small tetrasaxton specules. So, ang composition siyang specule is tetrasaxon. A few preserved specules from carbonate could potentially be from homoscleromorph sponge, but this record are only known from Mesozoic. So, next is the Desmospondia. Desmosponge are the most diverse class in the Phylum Porifera. They include 76.2% of all species of sponge, nearly 8,800 species worldwide. They are sponges with a soft body that covers hard, often massive skeleton made up of calcium carbonate. So, either aragonite or calcite. So, ang composition sa iyahang spicules is calcium carbonate. So, hexatinellida. Hexatinellid sponge are sponges with a skeleton made up of four and or six pointed siliceous spicules, often referred to as glass sponge. So, as you can see, referred to kanang murag yun siya glass o forma no, di ba? Murag siya baso. But then, if you will look deeper into that spicules, murag yun siya glass, murag daw siya dildo. They are actually classified along with other sponges in the Phylum Porifera, but some researchers consider them sufficiently distinct to deserve their own phylum. So, ayun, Symplasma. Pero debatable pa na siya, guys. Next. So, how do sponges reproduce? So, big question. Sponge can reproduce either asexually or sexually. So, asexual reproduction without sperm and egg often occurs by budding, similar to growing a new branch on a tree. So cells on the side of or base of a parent begins to bulge. So murag na yung burot and form a new organism. So hydra ba mo pop up from a parent cell, and then it grows into another organism. The buds may remain attached to the parent, or they may detach and settle down nearby from a separate organism. Siya diya sa iyahang parents or mo separate siya. So it depends on the circumstances. For example, kusog ang pressure sa tubig na ay possibilities nga ma-wash out siya. So maka-form siya og new settlement sa lahi na pud nga lugar, dili na siya magpundos yung parent. So sponges can also reproduce sexually when specialized gametocyte cells produce sperm and eggs. So as we all know, gametocytes, they are the sex cells. So sponges undergo synchronous spawning and eject sperm and egg into the water. So katsambahay lang ni sila abot di ang male nga female o male nga mag-produce, mag-eject lang og sperm og egg dito sa free water, and then if gametes from the same species meet, they will form a larval sponge. After a period of planktonic drifting, the larva settle to a suitable location on the bottom and grows into an adult sponge. So once successful nga the same species nga ang mag-meet nga egg og sperm is from a same species, produce a larva sponge. So kato nga sponge pag maanod mabalhin siya sa isa ka lugar, they will make a new settlement there, and they will be able to colonize another area. So even though na-sessile na sila pag adult, maka-colonize gihapon sila. New location. Can sponges survive without water? Quick question. So yes, sponges can survive. Freshwater sponges lang noon because sila lang mampod ang maka-experience. Sponges produce a resting stage called gemule. A gemule is a small insect encysted bud that can tolerate being dried out for a long period of time. When the gemule is exposed to water, it can resume development as a sponge. So, murag i-engulf niya iyang kaugalingon sa inani nga kuan, kinana nga pamaagi, and then maghulat na lang siya nga mubalik ang tubig to continue growing as a sponge. So no, kuya kayo, makasurvive din sila, kuya kayo ng adaptation nga nakuha. So survivor, organisms that can undergo a phase where they are dormant to survive harsh conditions are said to be cryptobiosis. From the root word crypto meaning hidden and bio meaning life. Because they do not appear to be living. In reality, these organisms are in state of suspended animation, meaning ayun na kuan sila. Even though mura silang namatay, buhi pa day sila. Next. So, why sponges are important? Ano importante ang sponge? Una, because they provide shelter. They provide shelter to those neighboring na mga animals nga nasa iyang palibot. For example, shrimp, isda, mga small fishes. They filter the ocean. Yes, they filter the ocean because as we have said, they are filter feeders. Those mga organic compounds that could harm mga fishes nga like mga nalata nga mga decaying body parts of an animal ilahang mga filter. So ayun, supports food web in a sense that most of the kuan sila ang murag nahulog na decomposers. So maintain deep sea biodiversity because they also commit symbiosis in the form of commensalism because ang sponge dili kayo maka benefit sa ilang mga neighbor organism nga nagpalibot sa iyaha because wa man pud kay sila mahatag, but then ang sponge naghatag og favor atong organism. For example, shrimp. Ang kaning shrimp kay there are some large bits of kaning kanang hugaw nga mahadto sa sponge, and then katong shrimp makakaon ato, and then it could be a settlement for a shrimp. So ang sponge wala siya nakuha nga benefit, but then wala po siya na harm, so that is why it is commensalism. So that would be all my report. Hope you have learned something. This is resources. Once again, I am Arnel Rox Piagirang, greeting you all. Good morning.